The hum of the ship's engines filled the quiet of the cockpit, a constant reminder that Cale Rourke was far from home. Cale sat in the pilot's seat of the aging freighter, staring out at the sprawling alien city below. The bright lights of Vrethox twinkled like stars, promising both danger and opportunity. His hands gripped the controls, but his mind was elsewhere. It had been years since he'd left Earth behind, years since the war, the firefights, and the nightmares had faded into distant memories. Now, the best he could do was repair broken machinery and keep a low profile. That was until the Kix Accords Academy called on him. The job had seemed simple: fix their broken machinery, work in their archives, and leave. But Cale had no idea how deeply tangled the Vrethox Academy was with something ancient, something Cale himself had never been prepared for. As the freighter touched down with a jarring thud, the whir of the landing gear broke his thoughts. A city full of unknown faces awaited him, alien species with customs he couldn't even begin to understand. But Cale wasn't here for them. He was here to fix a problem. A machine problem. The rest was irrelevant. He stepped out of the ship and felt the weight of the air. Something felt off. This planet with its oppressive stillness had a secret. Cale knew it instinctively. "Captain Rourke," a voice called. Cale turned to see a short, alien figure approaching. The Vrethox were a strange species, lanky, with dark metallic skin that shimmered like liquid and eyes that shifted color in sync with their emotions. Their body language was stiff, efficient, as if every motion had been calculated before it was made. This one, a technician named Zalara, was here to greet him. "I am to escort you to the academy, where you will be shown the problem we need you to fix," Zalara said in a voice that sounded like dry leaves crunching together. "We've been waiting for you, Captain Rourke." Cale grunted in response, adjusting his gear. He didn't like the way Zalara's eyes flickered when she mentioned waiting. As they walked, Zalara spoke of the Academy, its history, its prestigious place in galactic society. "The Academy houses an archive," she explained. "It's one of the oldest collections of intergalactic knowledge. It spans species, time, and even dimensions. We Vrethox are proud of it. We believe that studying these records will help guide our future." Cale nodded, but his mind was already drifting. What did any of this have to do with his work? He wasn't here to study anything. He was here to fix machines. The Academy's central archive was located in the heart of the city, a massive, monolithic structure made of dark stone. Its architecture seemed almost unnatural, as if it had been carved out of the planet itself. The entire building hummed with a quiet, mechanical energy that was more organic than artificial. Once inside, Zalara led Cale through corridors lined with vast data terminals and endless rows of holographic projections. Alien species flickered in and out of existence, flashes of life, preserved in digital formats. The archive was a museum of sorts, but with an air of purpose, as if it was more than just a record-keeping facility. The sheer weight of it was oppressive. "Here," Zalara said, her voice low and almost reverential. "This is the problem." She gestured toward a large terminal at the far end of the room. The screen was active, showing flashing warning signs and encrypted messages in a language Cale didn't recognize. "It's been malfunctioning," she continued. "The archives are not updating properly. The systems are going haywire and we can't pinpoint the cause. We've tried everything, but we need your expertise." Cale's brow furrowed. "I'm no alien tech expert," he muttered, "but I can try." He sat at the terminal, his hands already working as he bypassed security protocols and began running diagnostics. The system hummed louder as Cale dug deeper, searching for a way to fix the malfunction. As he went through the data streams, something caught his eye, something odd in the archive's file structure. A folder that was hidden, encrypted, marked with a warning symbol. He opened it. The file was labeled simply, "Earth Test Data." Cale's heart skipped a beat. He had seen Earth pop up in alien systems before, references to human history, fragments of lost knowledge, but nothing like this. This wasn't just a file about Earth. This was something more. He clicked on it. The screen flickered before displaying a series of disturbing images: dragons, phoenixes, krakens, and other mythical creatures from Earth's ancient history. They appeared frozen in time, suspended in stasis, their massive forms eerily still as they rested in dark, glass-like pods. Each image had a brief description, but the text was in another language. Then a single line of translated text caught his eye. "Species extinct, cause of extinction unknown." Cale's breath caught. He scrolled further. More creatures, more terrifying in their design, their biological purpose, all lost to time. And there, at the end of the file, was a footage clip labeled Test Data Stage 2. His fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before he hit play. The clip was grainy, filmed from a low-angle perspective. A battle unfolded before his eyes. Humans, primitive yet determined, fought against a giant winged dragon, their primitive weapons, spears, stone-tipped arrows, clashing against the beast's fiery breath. The humans were outmatched, outclassed by the creature's size and strength, but they persevered. They fought relentlessly until finally the creature collapsed, defeated. The clip ended abruptly. Cale sat frozen, his mind reeling. What was this? What kind of test was this? He went back to the earlier files, now connecting the dots between Earth's history and the archive. The creatures weren't just myths, they were part of a much larger experiment, one that spanned thousands of years. The Vrethoks, or whoever else had constructed this archive, had studied humanity's capacity for survival, testing us against creatures that had no business existing. The archive wasn't just a library, it was a record of a test, one that humanity had unknowingly passed. Cale's heart raced. He wasn't just a technician in this place, he was part of something far bigger than he'd imagined. Before he could process any further, a loud alarm echoed through the corridors of the academy. A red light began flashing across the terminal screen. Zalera rushed back into the room, her face pale. "What have you done?" she demanded. "The system's locking down." Cale turned to look at her, a sense of dread settling deep in his chest. I didn't mean to trigger it." Zalera's eyes widened in horror. "You've awoken the archive, it's reacting." The walls of the academy began to tremble. The ground beneath them rumbled with an ominous, deep vibration like a distant roar. Something powerful was stirring. Cale's hands shook as he grabbed his tools, preparing to leave. But before he could move, the terminal's screen blinked, flashing an emergency message across the room. "Subject Earth test data, activation in progress." The lights flickered once, twice, then everything went dark. Cale and Zalera find themselves trapped in the pitch-black archive, with an entire planet's worth of ancient, terrifying creatures now awakening from their stasis pods. The test was not just about humanity, it was about to begin again. The darkness in the archive was suffocating. Cale's breath came in sharp gasps, his hand instinctively reaching for his pulse blaster, though he knew it wouldn't help against the chaos that was brewing. The Academy's power grid was offline, leaving them trapped in an eerie quiet punctuated only by the distant sounds of something massive moving below their feet. "Zalera, what the hell is going on?" Cale's voice was low but urgent as he fumbled for a flashlight. The tiny beam cut through the blackness, dancing across the cold, metal walls of the archive, but it was no match for the looming terror that seemed to pulse through the very air. Zalera's voice trembled, barely audible in the void. "The archive! It wasn't supposed to activate." She paused, taking in a slow, shuddering breath. "It's a containment facility, designed to study humanity's survival against extinction-level threats." Cale turned to her, confusion flooding his mind. "Containment, you mean? This was some kind of experiment." Her voice was steady now, but Cale could hear the weight of centuries in her words. "Yes, Captain. Earth was the test subject. The archive was designed to record and catalog humanity's ability to adapt and survive against the most dangerous creatures ever known to the galaxy." Cale shook his head. "Wait a minute. These creatures weren't supposed to be real, were they? Dragons, krakens, phoenixes there." "Mythical," Zalera finished. "Yes, they were thought to be myths, but they were created, brought to Earth long ago as part of a galactic experiment. Humanity was never meant to survive it." The ground beneath them shook again, this time more violently, and the air seemed to hum with an energy Cale couldn't explain. Zalera moved swiftly, activating her wrist console, though the screen flickered sporadically. "I've accessed the Academy's emergency systems," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "We need to get to the lower levels where the archive's true vaults are kept. There's something much more dangerous down there." "What are we talking about?" Cale asked, feeling his pulse quicken. "Something worse than the dragon." Zalera looked at him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and something darker, something Cale couldn't quite place. "The final stage? The Griffin. It's the last of the creatures, the one that could end everything." Before Cale could ask any more questions, the sound of ripping metal echoed through the archive, followed by a deep, guttural roar. He froze. Zalera's eyes widened as she glanced back toward the hall they had just walked through. "They've reached the vaults," she whispered, barely audible. "We need to move," Kale said, his voice firm. He turned and bolted for the hallway, his boots pounding against the floor. "Zalara, get to the lower levels now." Zalara hesitated for a split second before nodding. She sprinted after Kale, her metallic limbs making no sound on the cold floors as they raced toward the nearest elevator. "The Griffin isn't just a predator, Kale," she said breathlessly as they ran. "It's a weapon." Kale glanced over at her. A weapon, a creature, he felt a knot form in his stomach. How can a creature be a weapon? Zalara's eyes flicked to him, haunted. The Griffin was created to test something far more dangerous than human survival. It was engineered to outlast everything, to test humanity's adaptability under the most extreme conditions. And now it's free. They reached the elevator and Kale pressed the button. What exactly are we dealing with here? How can something like that be kept in check? Zalara's face grew more somber. The Griffin is more than just a creature. It's a predator born of galactic engineering, designed to push humanity past its limits. It's the final stage of the test, a creature that would have wiped out human civilization if humanity hadn't adapted. The elevator doors opened with a low whine and they stepped inside. As the doors closed, Kale glanced at the screens. The power was out, but the emergency system still had some functionality. "We've got seconds, Zalara. What happens when the Griffin's out?" Zalara didn't answer immediately. She seemed lost in thought, her eyes distant. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "If the Griffin gets out of the vaults, it won't stop until everything that's not it is eradicated." The elevator began its descent, moving deeper into the core of the academy. Kale couldn't shake the feeling that they were moving into the belly of the beast itself. As the elevator descended, they passed through long corridors of old, industrial architecture. Lights flickered above them, casting long shadows along the walls. Every sound seemed amplified in the silence, and Kale found his pulse pounding in his ears. Something was down here, something ancient and deadly. Suddenly, a loud crash sounded from one of the lower levels, followed by the unmistakable sound of a shrieking roar. Kale's stomach dropped. He grabbed Zalara's arm, pulling her to a halt just as the elevator doors opened with a sharp hiss. "Stay close," Kale muttered, glancing down the dark hallway ahead. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something else, something metallic. They stepped out of the elevator and into the shadows of the lower vault levels. The vault doors were massive, circular, and reinforced with thick slabs of metal. Kale's eyes narrowed. "This is it, right? The Griffin's cage." Zalara nodded but looked uneasy. "Yes, but I can't guarantee it's going to stay locked down for much longer." Just as they started moving forward, a loud mechanical noise echoed down the hallway, followed by a deep, resonating growl. Kale turned quickly to face Zalara, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. "That doesn't sound like the Griffin." The growl deepened, turning into a terrifying, echoing roar that shook the walls. Kale's heart thudded in his chest, but he didn't have time to react. He was about to speak when a massive shadow moved across the hallway, followed by the flash of sharp, glowing eyes. Kale barely had time to react as a huge, serpent-like creature appeared out of nowhere, its scales glistening in the dim light. Its head was massive, and its jaws stretched wide, dripping with venom. "What the hell is that?" Kale shouted. Zalara stepped in front of him, her hand outstretched. "It's another one." The creature lunged, and for a split second, everything seemed to slow down. Kale reached for his blaster, but Zalara's arm shot out in front of him, a shield of energy forming in midair, deflecting the creature's strike. The shield flickered and failed, and the creature's venomous tail swung toward them, aiming directly for Kale's chest. The room exploded into chaos as he dove to the side. The stakes are higher now. Not only are they fighting to contain the Griffin, but other creatures have awoken and are threatening to tear the academy apart. Can Kale and Zalara survive the onslaught, or is the final test about to begin? The creature's venomous tail slashed through the air with terrifying precision. Kale's heart raced, his instincts kicking in just as the tail whipped toward him. He dove sideways, narrowly avoiding the strike, but the sheer force of the blow sent a tremor through the floor, and the air was thick with the stench of burning ozone. "Move," Zalara shouted, grabbing Kale by the arm and yanking him toward a nearby corridor. The creature roared again, its voice like thunder reverberating through the walls. Its massive form was coiling, ready to strike again. Kale pulled himself to his feet, heart hammering in his chest. What the hell is that thing? It wasn't in the archives. Zalara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled Kale into a narrow maintenance passage where the dim lights flickered above them. I don't know, she said, her voice strained. This is why the archive exists, not just to study extinction but to control it, and now they've broken free. The creature's growl echoed in the distance, growing fainter as they sprinted down the corridor. Kale glanced back briefly, his eyes narrowing in fear. The creature was massive, its serpent-like body coiling with unnatural speed, a ripple of ferocious energy emanating from it. He could hear its claws scraping against the metal floors as it pursued them. So what the archive isn't just a museum? Kale panted, his legs burning with effort. It's a prison. Zalara looked back at him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and regret. Yes, the archive was meant to hold the apex predators, the last remnants of ancient life. They were all brought to Earth as part of the test to see if humanity could survive extinction. But now, she trailed off, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Now we're all dead, Kale muttered, his voice grim. But Zalara shook her head, her jaw tightening. Not yet. If we can reach the core of the archive, we might be able to stop this. Kale wasn't convinced, but he kept running, trusting Zalara as much as he could. How do you stop something like that? Zalara turned sharply into another hallway, her pace increasing. We need to get to the archive's central command, the mainframe. If we can re-establish control, we can shut down the creature's release mechanisms. And the Griffin? Kale asked, his thoughts jumping to the deadliest predator of all. What about it? Zalara hesitated. The Griffin is different. It's a weapon. It's a force of nature designed to outlast any species. We can't stop it, only contain it, but that's not the worst part. Kale's brow furrowed. What's worse than that? The archive was designed by an ancient civilization, Zalara said, her voice low and heavy with the weight of what she was about to reveal. A civilization that saw extinction as a natural part of the galaxy's order. They created the archive to ensure that only the strongest survived. The Griffin. It was never just about survival. It was about testing a species' limits. But humanity, your species, didn't just survive the test. You redefined what survival meant. Kale stopped dead in his tracks. You mean we're not the only species that's been tested? Zalara nodded, her expression solemn. No, every species in the galaxy has been tested. The archive is a record of that. The creatures, dragons, krakens, phoenixes, they were all designed to challenge sentient life, to see if a species could adapt, evolve, and survive. And humanity, your people didn't just pass. You forced the archive's creators to reconsider what was possible. Kale's head was spinning. So, humanity's the test subject, but we didn't know about it. Exactly. Before Kale could process this new information, the sound of screeching metal echoed through the corridor. The creature was closing in fast. We need to keep moving, Zalara urged, grabbing his arm and pulling him into a series of tight, winding passages. Kale could hear the creature's growls, feel the vibrations of its movements shaking the walls around them. They emerged into a wide chamber, the central core of the archive. A massive, circular platform sat at the center of the room, surrounded by holographic data streams and complex alien machinery. This was the heart of the archive, where all data, all knowledge was stored and processed. Zalara rushed to one of the control panels, quickly typing in commands with a sense of urgency. Kale watched the screens flicker, showing chaotic data streams, locked systems, and incomplete protocols. Come on, Zalara muttered to herself, slamming her fist against the console in frustration. Can you fix it? Kale asked, his voice tense. Zalara didn't look up. I'm trying, but it's... She stopped, eyes widening in horror as the screen flashed an alarming message. No, this can't be right. Kale stepped closer. What is it? Zalara pointed to the screen, her voice barely above a whisper. The creatures are evolving. They're adapting faster than the system can handle. Kale's stomach twisted. What does that mean? Zalara's hands flew over the controls, but the systems seemed to be fighting back. It means they're no longer just animals. They're learning. The Griffin is already interfacing with the system. It's gaining control. Can't you stop it? Kale demanded, his panic rising. Zalara paused, looking at Kale with a strange mix of sorrow and resolve. We can't. Not without risking the entire archive. We need to isolate the core before it spreads. Just then the doors to the chamber exploded open, and a massive, serpentine form slithered into the room. The creature, its scales glistening with a dark iridescence, hissed menacingly as it advanced. Its eyes were glowing, burning with an otherworldly rage. Kale recognized it, the same creature from earlier, now fully free, its power amplified by the malfunctioning systems. Zalera didn't hesitate. She grabbed Kale's arm and pulled him toward the central platform, but the creature was faster. It lunged. The creature's jaws snapped shut just inches from Kale's face, its venomous breath hot and rancid. Zalara's hand shot out, and she activated the energy shield just in time, blocking the creature's strike. But it wasn't enough. The shield flickered dangerously as the creature began to push through. The creatures are growing smarter, adapting to the Academy systems. The Griffin is now controlling the archive, and the clock is ticking. Kale and Zalera are trapped in a room with one of the most dangerous creatures to ever walk the galaxy. Can they outwit the beasts and shut down the archive before it's too late? The creature's hiss was deafening as it pressed forward, the force of its body slamming into the energy shield. The light from the shield flickered erratically, straining against the sheer weight of the creature's attack. Kale's heart pounded in his chest as he gripped Zalara's arm, his mind racing. "We can't keep this up," Kale shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the creature. "The shield won't last much longer." Zalara's face was grim, her eyes locked on the flickering shield as she frantically typed commands into the central console. "I know. We need to isolate the core before it adapts further." Her hands moved with blinding speed, her fingers tapping on the holographic controls, but the creature didn't give them a moment to breathe. It was relentless, pounding against the shield with unholy force. "The Griffin, it's using the archive systems to boost its power," Zalera said, her voice tight. "If we don't act now, it will take full control." Kale's mind raced, and for a moment his training kicked in. He wasn't just a technician, a man of machines. He was a soldier, and soldiers didn't give up. "What if we overload the system?" Kale asked, his eyes scanning the room for any advantage. "If we can overload the core, we might be able to disable it long enough to make a run for it." Zalera's eyes flashed. "That's risky. The core is tied directly to the creature's stasis pods. If we overload it, we could kill them all." Her gaze hardened, but she didn't hesitate. "But if we don't, they'll destroy everything." "Then we do it," Kale said, stepping forward toward the console. "I'll do the engineering. You handle the interface. We'll need to redirect the power and feed it back into the core." Zalera didn't argue. She knew it was the only chance they had. The creature's roar filled the room again, and Kale barely managed to dodge as it lunged at him, jaws snapping shut with a sickening crunch. The shield was starting to flicker, falter, and Kale could see it. The creature, smarter and faster, was beginning to predict the shield's weakness, pressing harder with every attack. "Hurry," Zalera shouted, her voice cracking under the pressure. "We're running out of time." Kale didn't look at her. His focus was solely on the console now, his hands moving like lightning. The stakes couldn't be higher. His fingers danced across the interface, redirecting power flows, analyzing the archive systems. He found the central power grid, its circuits glowing faintly, almost as if they knew what was about to happen. With a deep breath, Kale began to manipulate the feed, overloading the grid in a controlled way, just enough to disrupt the creature's connection to the system. "Ready?" Kale asked, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. Zalera nodded, her face tense. "Now." Kale hit the final command. The room shuddered as the power grid surged and the creature's attack faltered. For a split second, Kale thought they had succeeded. But then the air shifted, becoming heavier, thicker, and a deep, bone-rattling growl reverberated through the vault. The creature recoiled, its massive head swiveling toward the center of the room. Its eyes glowed brighter, more focused, as if it had been waiting for this. The power surge had done something unexpected. It had triggered the Griffin's awakening. "No, this wasn't part of the plan," Zalera shouted as she watched the holographic display flash a warning. "Griffin, ACTIVATING." "What do we do now?" Kale asked, his voice tight. Zalera's eyes widened. "We didn't account for the Griffin's adaptive capacity. It's interfacing with the systems at a level beyond anything we've seen." Kale gritted his teeth. He wasn't going to let this beast win, not after everything they had fought for. "We need to lock it out, shut it down, now." But before they could make another move, the room trembled again and the lights went out entirely. Darkness filled the vault, broken only by the eerie glow of the Griffin's eyes as it paced closer. Its massive body loomed in the shadows, its wings unfurled like a nightmarish specter. "What happened to the power?" Kale shouted, trying to see through the blackness. Zalara's voice was cold with realization. "The Griffin, it's taking control of the facility's power. We're trapped." Kale felt the hair on the back of his neck stand on end as the creature's low growl echoed through the blackened vault. The Griffin wasn't just a predator, it was a force. A being that could adapt, change, and evolve faster than anything Kale had ever encountered. "We need to go now," Zalara snapped, grabbing Kale's arm and pulling him toward a side passage. But as they turned to leave, the Griffin's massive shadow fell across the hallway, blocking their path. The creature's wings were spread wide now, its body seeming to fill the entire room. It was moving slowly, deliberately, its claws scraping against the ground. The Griffin wasn't just hunting them, it was toying with them. Kale and Zalara had nowhere to go. They were trapped, backed into a corner by a creature that had just begun its rampage. "We're not going to make it," Kale said, his voice hoarse but his mind racing. "There has to be something." Suddenly the creature lunged, its massive claws slashing through the air like a blur heading straight for Kale. He barely had time to react. "Zalara." In the split second before the claws made contact, Zalara thrust herself forward, a pulse of blinding blue light flashing from her body. "Get down!" she screamed, just as the force of the Griffin's strike hit the energy shield she created. The impact sent both of them sprawling to the floor. Kale scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. The shield flickered again but held, just long enough for them to escape. "This isn't over," Zalara said, gasping for breath, her eyes filled with a grim determination. "The Griffin can't be stopped, not by conventional means. It's evolving, becoming something worse." Kale felt a chill run down his spine. The Griffin had only just begun. "We need to find a way to stop it permanently." But before Zalara could respond, a new sound, one that made Kale's blood run cold, echoed through the chamber. It wasn't the roar of the Griffin. It was the sound of more creatures awakening. The vault doors behind them trembled, and more stasis pods began to open, releasing the next wave of apex predators, creatures designed to test humanity's survival. They were no longer just threats. They were humanity's judges, and the final test had just begun. Kale and Zalara are on the edge of survival, but now the true scale of the experiment is revealed. With the Griffin becoming stronger and more unpredictable, will they be able to stop the creatures, and themselves, from becoming part of a new evolutionary extinction? The sound of cracking metal and the sickening screech of a creature's claws echoed through the vault. The air felt thick with tension, almost alive, as if the entire facility was holding its breath. Kale and Zalara barely had time to react as the stasis pods behind them began to shudder, groaning under the strain of whatever hellish force was awakening inside. The Griffin's roar pierced the air, its wings pushing the air so violently that the walls trembled. Zalara's shield flickered one last time, barely holding under the onslaught of the Griffin's rage. Kale could see the creature's eyes, glowing like embers in the dark. Its focus was locked on them, its primal intelligence calculating the next move. It was no longer simply attacking, it was planning, anticipating. "Zalara, we need help," Kale shouted, trying to move closer to her as the shield began to flicker. "We can't stop this thing alone." Zalara's face was grim, her eyes narrowed in a mix of fear and determination. "I know, but there's no one here." She paused, her voice low, almost a whisper. "At least that's what I thought." Before Kale could ask what she meant, the ground beneath them rumbled again, this time more violently. The walls cracked, and the ceiling above began to shake. Dust and debris rained down, blinding them for a split second. Through the chaos, Kale heard a distant voice, barely audible above the noise. "You're not alone." He spun around, eyes widening in disbelief. A figure emerged from the shadows. The Vrethox warriors, their silhouettes barely visible in the dim light, moved like shadows, each one armed with advanced weaponry. These weren't just any Vrethox, they were rogue elements of their species, outsiders who had long questioned the Academy's methods. Kale's pulse quickened. He'd never seen them before, but he had heard rumors of their existence, an underground faction that opposed the Academy's experiments. "Who are you?" Kale demanded, his voice sharp. The figure in the front of the group, a Vrethox female with silver-colored plating, stepped forward, her eyes flicking to the Griffin and then back to Kale. "We're the ones who have been watching," she said, her voice strong though tinged with urgency. We've been trying to stop this for years. We knew humanity was the test subject. We just didn't know you would be the one to survive. Kale's mind raced. You're saying you knew about this experiment, the Griffin, the archive? The Vrethox nodded, stepping closer. Yes, we didn't agree with it, but we didn't know how to stop it. The Academy. It's been manipulating us all, using our history and the data from the archive to control what happens next. But the creatures are evolving, adapting in ways we never predicted. Kale could feel the weight of the words sink in. And you're here to help us? He asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and hope. The Vrethox warrior's eyes hardened. We're here because if we don't stop this, it won't just be Earth. It'll be the entire galaxy. How do we stop it? Zalara's voice cut through the tension. She was still struggling to keep the shield intact, but her focus never wavered. The Griffin is controlling the systems. We can't just shut it down from here. The silver-plated Vrethox stepped forward. You're right, but there's a way. The central core, the one that's keeping the creatures contained. We need to access the master key, the one that controls the entire system. If we can reach it, we can reprogram the core, disable the creatures, and put them back into stasis. And you can do this? Kale asked, raising an eyebrow. The Vrethox smiled grimly. We can, but we need your help. Kale hesitated. What do you need me for? The Vrethox warrior held out her hand, revealing a small, glowing device. It was intricate, almost alien in design. We need someone with your engineering skills to access the core. We can't do it from here. But you, Captain Rourke, you're the only one who can bypass the system's safeguards. Kale's eyes narrowed. And what do you want in return? The Vrethox woman's expression softened, though her voice remained firm. We want to make sure this never happens again. The Academy needs to be stopped. The experiment needs to be exposed to the galaxy. Kale's gaze flicked to Zalara, who nodded, her face showing a mix of resignation and hope. She's right. We need to end this. Kale looked at the device in the Vrethox's hand, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. All right, he said, taking the device. We're in, but we do this fast. We move out now, the Vrethox leader said, her voice urgent. The Griffin is only the beginning. There are worse things waiting. The rogue Vrethox warriors scattered, preparing to take their positions. Kale, Zalara, and the Vrethox leader moved quickly toward the central control room. As they neared the entrance, Kale's heart raced. They were running out of time. The Griffin was no longer just a creature. It was an idea, a living embodiment of everything humanity had been tested against. And if they didn't stop it now, the entire galaxy would be in danger. They entered the control room, a vast chamber filled with blinking lights and holographic projections. The core's massive interface lay ahead, a towering structure of alien design, glowing with a sickly green light. At the heart of it, Kale saw it, the master key, floating within a crystalline structure, surrounded by a complex network of protective barriers. That's it, Zalara said, pointing to the key. If we can access that, we can reprogram the entire system. Kale nodded, stepping forward. We don't have much time, stay alert. As he approached the crystalline structure, the lights around them flickered and the room shuddered. The Griffin wasn't far behind. The temperature seemed to drop, and Kale could hear its wings beating in the distance, like the heartbeat of a predator closing in for the kill. Kale reached the console and began typing in the access code. The system fought back, trying to block his every move, but he pushed through, using his knowledge of the Academy's technology to override the safeguards. His fingers flew over the keys, and the crystalline structure before him began to shimmer. We're almost there, Kale muttered to himself. Just a little more. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room. The Griffin had found them. Kale's eyes flicked up to the glowing key, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the creature's presence, its massive wings beating the air with brutal power. There was no more time. With a final desperate motion, Kale hit the last key. The room exploded with light. The system went silent. The Griffin froze in its tracks, its massive body caught in the sudden disruption. Kale's eyes widened. But before he could make sense of what had happened, a new alert flashed across the central console. Griffin, adaptive shutdown failed. New override code detected. The battle for the Academy is reaching its peak, but as Kale and Zalara move to stop the creatures, the Griffin has evolved yet again. New dangers are emerging. Can they reach the core before it's too late, or will they become the next test in a galaxy-wide experiment? The flashing alert on the console froze Kale's blood. The system had detected something, new override code, and it wasn't just any safeguard. This was something more advanced, more dangerous than anything Kale had expected. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, frozen in disbelief as the numbers on the screen rapidly scrolled, indicating that the Griffin had adapted. Again. What the hell is happening? Kale's voice was tight with panic, but Zalara's eyes were locked on the screen, her face pale. It's recalibrating the override protocols. The Griffin. It's taken control of the system's backup defenses. Her voice shook slightly. It's now trying to lock us out completely. Kale's fists clenched. We've only got seconds, Zalara. We can't let it adapt any further. The room trembled, and the Griffin's roar echoed through the halls, growing louder, closer. Kale could hear the massive creature's claws scraping against the metal floors, its wings beating against the air in a rhythmic, predatory motion. It was coming for them, and it was going to tear through them if they didn't act fast. I need access to the master key, Kale said, his mind racing. If I can access the final security terminal, I can disable the override. No, Zalara said sharply. We need to do more than disable it. We need to sever the Griffin's connection to the archive entirely. If we don't, it will break free, and not just the Griffin, the other creatures too. Kale looked at her, trying to understand the gravity of the situation. What do you mean? The Griffin's connection to the archive isn't just about the stasis pods. It's controlling the entire release mechanism for all the creatures. Zalara's eyes flicked to the control console, where the map of the vaults now pulsed ominously. If we don't stop it, every creature locked away in the archive will be set free, and they'll be able to adapt to any environment. They won't just hunt, they'll reshape the galaxy. Kale felt his stomach drop, and we're standing in the middle of it, with no way to escape. Zalara nodded, her eyes flashing with determination. No, there is a way, but we need to work together. The ground shook again, and the Griffin's roar intensified, reverberating through the metal walls. Kale's pulse quickened as the massive creature's presence loomed closer, the sound of its wings deafening. Zalara stepped toward the console, her eyes narrowing. I've managed to access some of the system's secondary functions. I can redirect power to the central core, but it will only buy us a few moments. Her voice was grim, but she didn't hesitate. You'll need to physically enter the command center and initiate the self-destruct sequence on the stasis locks. If we can't break the Griffin's grip, we'll have to destroy the entire archive. Kale's jaw clenched. We don't have a choice, let's do it. They moved quickly, weaving through the darkened corridors, the sounds of the Griffin's footsteps reverberating in the distance, growing ever closer. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, like the entire facility was alive, reacting to the presence of the awakened creatures. They were no longer simply trapped in a failing system. They were racing against time itself. As they approached the command center, Kale's mind raced. You said this was all part of a test, an experiment. Who the hell thought it was a good idea to turn humanity into lab rats? His voice was laced with disgust. Zalara's eyes softened for a moment. We didn't know. The archive was meant to be a repository for knowledge, not a weapon, but the creatures. They weren't meant to test humanity, they were meant to test everything else. And humanity's survival. It was an anomaly. The creators of the archive never accounted for a species that refused to die. Kale didn't respond. He didn't have the words. He was too focused on the task at hand. We're almost there, just a little longer. They reached the final door to the command center, and Zalara swiped her hand across a holographic pad. The door slid open, revealing a massive, sterile room filled with data terminals and glowing interfaces. At the center of the room, a massive hologram of the Griffin flickered on the central screen, its eyes glowing with an eerie, predatory intelligence. It knows we're here, Zalara said softly, her voice filled with awe and fear. We need to get to the core terminal now. Kale nodded, his hand reaching for the interface, his heart pounding in his chest. As he approached, the hologram of the Griffin flickered once more, then the creature's eyes locked on him. You cannot escape. The voice was deep, echoing in Kale's mind as much as through the room. It was as if the Griffin's very presence had seeped into the archive, using the technology to communicate directly with them. You will fail, human. You will become part of the test, like all the others. Kale's hand shook, but he didn't let it stop him. He plugged the device from the Vrethox leader into the terminal, and the screen flashed as he initiated the sequence to shut down the Griffin's connection. Do it now, Zalara shouted, her voice full of urgency. Kale hit the final command. For a brief moment, nothing happened. The room was deathly silent, except for the low hum of the central system, as if the archive itself were holding its breath. Then, the system roared to life. The griffin screeched in anger, its image flickering on the screen as the power began to shift. "No, you cannot stop it," the voice echoed, now filled with rage. Cale didn't have time to think. He reached for the emergency shutdown lever at the base of the terminal and yanked it down with all his strength. The entire room shook violently, and the walls cracked as the backup power systems activated. And then, with a deafening screech, the archive systems went dark. The room fell silent. Zalara's voice was barely a whisper. "Did we do it?" Cale wiped sweat from his brow, eyes glued to the terminal. The screen flickered once more and then went black. "No," Cale whispered, his eyes widening. "It's not over, something's wrong." Suddenly, a loud, grinding sound echoed through the room. The vault doors behind them began to open with an ominous creak, and Cale's blood ran cold as he realized what was happening. The creatures were awakening, but not in the way they expected. The griffin wasn't the only one trying to escape. With the creatures now released into the galaxy, the final battle is only just beginning. Will Cale and Zalara be able to stop the archive's nightmare from spreading across the universe? Or will they become the next test subject in a galactic war they never asked to fight? The grinding noise reverberated through the control room, and Cale's heart skipped a beat. He spun around, his instincts screaming that they were no longer in control of the situation. The massive vault doors were slowly opening, revealing an eerie, mechanical hum, like the sound of an ancient machine awakening from centuries of slumber. "This isn't possible," Cale muttered under his breath, his eyes darting between Zalara and the terminal, which was still flickering with warnings. "The creatures are escaping," Zalara whispered, her voice filled with a quiet horror. "The griffin's control has spread. It's no longer just one species, all the creatures are breaking free." Cale didn't waste time. "We need to get out of here," he said, grabbing Zalara by the arm. "Now." But before they could move, a loud crash rang through the air. The griffin's wings tore through the wall, its massive body emerging from the shadows, eyes burning with rage and intelligence. Cale's pulse skyrocketed. It was more than just an animal. It was something alive, aware, and determined to finish what it had started. The griffin's claws scraped against the floor as it growled, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundation of the archive. "You cannot escape, human," its voice echoed in Cale's mind once more, deeper, more powerful than before. "This is your test, and you will fail." Cale's breath caught in his chest. "We need to stop it now. This has to end." "No," Zalara said urgently, pulling him back. "It's too late. We can't fight it here. The archive is collapsing. The creatures are waking, and the griffin's control over them is spreading." Cale's mind raced. "Then what do we do?" Zalara's eyes hardened. "We end the test." Her words hit Cale like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean, how?" Zalara's gaze shifted toward the terminal, where the vault doors were now fully open, and the shadows of the creatures, dragons, krakens, and others, began to slither, crawl, and move toward freedom. The archive was collapsing, and the creatures were no longer bound by its artificial systems. The Vrethox's test had been designed to find the strongest species, but humanity had broken the rules. And now it was up to Cale and Zalara to stop the ultimate nightmare from spilling into the galaxy. "We have one last option," Zalara said, her voice grim but resolute. "We destroy the archive completely. We take out the core and everything goes with it. The creatures will be contained again, but it'll cost us everything." Cale's mind reeled. "That's suicide." Zalara met his gaze. "It's the only way to stop it. The griffin's control is linked to the archive's core. If we can destroy the core, the creatures will be trapped in their pods once more. They'll be preserved, and humanity won't have to live with the legacy of what the archive has created." Cale looked at her, eyes searching. "And the griffin?" Zalara nodded solemnly. "It'll be locked away with them, all of them." Cale's thoughts raced. He had been trained for combat, for survival, but this, destroying the archive, he wasn't sure if it was madness or the last piece of humanity's fight against extinction. But in this moment, he knew that humanity's will to survive had pushed them this far. If they didn't act now, the galaxy would be at the mercy of predators designed to conquer it. "Let's do it." They turned toward the terminal, but the griffin was already upon them. Its claws were like blades, raking the floor, its wings spread wide as it advanced toward them. Kale raised his weapon instinctively, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. Nothing was enough against this creature. "You cannot stop this," the griffin hissed, its voice colder, more calculating. "You will die here just like the others before you, all the species that failed the test. You're just another chapter in the archive." Kale's pulse hammered in his ears, but he didn't hesitate. "We're not done yet." He pulled the device the Vrethox leader had given him from his pocket, activating the final command sequence. Zalara joined him, her fingers moving across the holographic controls as the archive's systems began to power up, humming with energy. "Get ready," Zalara warned, her voice tense. "Once we initiate the sequence, the entire archive will collapse. We have to move fast." But just as they began the process, the griffin lunged. Its claws raked across the floor, sending sparks flying. Kale fired, but the blast only glanced off its scales. The griffin was adapting faster than ever, and it wasn't going to let them win this time. "Zalara," Kale shouted, "we need to go now." Zalara didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the core terminal as she pushed the last command. The countdown began. 5 minutes, the voice of the archive's AI echoed. "Sequence initiated, core deactivation in progress." "It's over," Zalara whispered, her voice filled with quiet relief. But the griffin wasn't finished. With a roar of fury, it flapped its wings, sending a blast of wind that knocked Kale and Zalara off their feet. The room shook as the archive's core began to power down, but the griffin didn't retreat. It advanced, its claws reaching for them. Kale scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. "We have to hold it off." But just as the griffin lunged again, a massive explosion rocked the vault. The core detonated, sending a wave of energy through the archive. The griffin froze, its body shuddering as the power surged through it. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The creature's eyes glazed over, and it collapsed to the ground with a deafening crash. "Did we do it?" Zalara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale didn't answer at first. He looked at the griffin, then at the shattered remnants of the archive. The core was gone. The systems had shut down. "It's over," Kale said finally, his voice filled with exhaustion. "The creatures are locked away again. Humanity, we're safe." But as the dust settled and the final remnants of the archive crumbled, Kale looked out over the ruin. The archive was gone, but humanity's place in the galaxy had changed forever. Just as Kale and Zalara prepared to leave, a final alert flashed across the screen. "Unknown data stream detected. Archive destruction incomplete. Contingency protocols activated." The test may be over for now, but humanity has proven that it will always adapt, always survive. As the galaxy reels from the destruction of the archive, the question remains, what happens when a species designed to fail refuses to do so? The journey is far from finished. Humanity's future, its destiny, is just beginning.